Welcome to Candidate Conversations, part of Delaware Debates 2016, produced by Delaware Public Media in collaboration with the University of Delaware's Center for Political Communication and with support from AARP. I'm Delaware Public Media News Director Tom Byrne. This conversation, taped on the campus of Delaware State University, focuses on the race for governor, and we are joined by Republican Colin Bonini. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me.
Well, let's start with the basic question. Why are you running for governor?
Because Delaware's at a crossroads, and Delaware's hurting, and people in Delaware are suffering. We have, in my opinion, one of the worst economies on the East Coast. We have one of the lowest labor participation rates in the country. I was just telling you off the air, we have families in Delaware that just a few years ago were doing fine, that now literally in my district I have families that have 4 jobs between them, 2 low-paying part-time jobs for each of the parents. And that's just unacceptable. And Delaware is at a crossroads, and we've got to change course. That's the bottom line.
The governor is the state's chief executive. Yep. How would you describe the leadership style that you would bring to the job?
I run up the hill with the flag. Please follow. Is it collaborative? Absolutely. I think one of the strengths I can bring is I am smart enough to know that I'm not the smartest guy. I'm a pretty smart guy, but I don't have all the answers, right? So I think one of the great strengths I'd bring is I'm smart enough to hire to my weaknesses and put good people in good positions, listen to them, and let them do their job. And the reality is, I think our state government is horribly broken in a lot of ways, but it's fixable. And if we have strong leadership and appoint people to make those changes in the administration, I think we can do it. Let's
talk about some issues. State revenue estimates for the coming year, not exactly very rosy.
Right.
Some have suggested looking harder at spending. You're one of those people. There's also been a fair amount of discussion, even committees, to look at revenue sources.
Right.
Where should the priority be in making sure the state is on the right budgetary track?
So my bottom line is Delaware does not have a revenue problem. Delaware has a spending problem. We are one of the most expensive state governments in the country. Depending on which survey you look at, we're 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th most expensive per capita in the entire country. Our total expenditures, including our budget and capital expenditures and pass-throughs for the federal government, approaches $10 billion. That's billion with a B. Delaware does not have a revenue problem. We don't need to raise anybody's taxes, and we should be actually looking to lower people's taxes. We need to be looking at reducing spending, and reducing spending in a responsible way.
Let's talk about one of the more difficult revenue items, or budget items, I should say, healthcare costs, both Medicaid and state employee health benefits. What can the state do to address these costs, which are obviously ballooning?
Sure. Well, first of all, great question, and I'm glad that this is getting out into the public and these questions are being asked. The bottom line is in state government, the money is in 2 places. It is in Medicaid and it is in state employees' benefits and salaries, right? So unless you address those things, you're not addressing spending, right? So I think the first answer on the state employee health care is there has to be a mix. We don't want to put all of the burden on our current state employees, but the reality is we're probably going to have to increase the premiums slightly at least, and we're going to have to look at reducing the reimbursement rates and potentially reducing the benefits. That's the bottom line. Anybody who tells you that they can fix this without doing all 3 of those things is not being truthful with you. So that's the state benefit side. On the Medicaid side, we have an opportunity. Any estimates on inefficiencies, fraud, abuse, and duplicative services goes from anywhere from 5% to 10%. That doesn't sound like a big number. 10% of $2.4 billion is $240 million. That money is out there for us to go and save. We just have to have the leadership to do it. And the reality is these things are doable. We can fix employee health care. We can pull back on spending on Medicaid and still give people the safety net that they deserve. But it's going to require strong leadership in the governor's office and in the General Assembly. And I think anybody who knows me, and we've known Tom in my career in the Senate, I'm not afraid to make decisions.
One of the ways people talk about helping the state budget is increasing revenue by bringing obviously more jobs to Delaware, broadening the tax base.
Sure.
Concerns about creating and retaining jobs have been kind of front and center this year, particularly in the wake of the Dow-DuPont merger.
Sure.
What steps would you take if elected to help boost economic growth, raise revenues, raise wages, create jobs that would broaden that tax base? Well,
first of all, your answer is in part of the question. We don't need to raise taxes. We need 10,000 more high-paying jobs, decent-paying jobs. And we can do that. And you do that through right to work, which I realize that the leadership of unions will certainly oppose. Mm-hmm. But I tell you, 26 states in this country have right to work. They are all doing better than Delaware's economy, basically. I mean, we've lost 30,000 manufacturing jobs in this state over the last 20 years. We can bring many of those jobs back if we have the courage to pass a right to work bill. And people say, oh, what is right to work? All we're saying is You can join a union if you want to. You shouldn't be forced to join a union. When we go to CEOs and say, and by the way, the Delaware Economic Development Office did this and said, why aren't you bringing your businesses to Delaware? They said 3 reasons. 1, you're not a right to work state. 2, your public schools aren't good enough. And 3, your utility rates are too high. All 3 of those things are fixable. But it takes strong leadership to do it, and you have to be willing to take on very powerful, entrenched political interests to do it. If we can address those 3 issues, the businesses will come and will grow, and we'll have a thriving economy. And we can do those things.
You mentioned education. That's where I wanted to go next.
Sure.
Education has certainly been a contentious issue in this state as well the last couple of years. From plans to redistrict Wilmington schools, to opting out of state assessment tests, to really just basically how schools are funded in the state, there seems to be a lot of concern out there about what the direction of education policy in this state. What should the state, in your opinion, be doing in the realm of education?
Do you have an hour?
Not quite. Give me the Reader's Digest.
I'll give you the Reader's Digest. So let me just first of all say, nobody, and I don't have all the answers, right? I have some ideas that I think will be helpful. First of all, we got to reward good teachers. That's the bottom line. If you're a poor performing teacher, we need to try to help you become a good teacher. And if you can't become a good teacher, you can't be in the classroom. The number one complaint I get from teachers and people in the school districts are disruptive students. So we've got to start creating a culture in the classroom that leads to learning. In terms of school funding, absolutely right, needs to be reformed. The dollars now are, spun through this process at DOE where we create these units, and the units then are distributed to districts, and the units are based on, somebody's idea of what the student body looks like. The reality is the money should follow the student. So I think that's, fixable. But the bottom line here is, in a lot of cases, our public school debate, in fact, you brought up some of these issues, have nothing to do with children. And, when we talk about public schools in the General Assembly, it's frequently about the adults in the public school system. We need to focus this discussion on the children. And I know that sounds oversimplistic, but it's the absolute truth. The only reason we build those buildings is to educate children. And we need to measure whether those children are being taught, and if they're not being taught, then we need to fix it. And I think all of these things are fixable. We have some fantastic public schools in Delaware. We have the models. We have some fantastic teachers in Delaware. We have the peer mentors. We just have to have the political will to do it. And just real quickly, I realize you want to get on to your next question.
Sure.
Delaware public schools are broken. And not a lot of politicians are willing to say that because they're afraid of the political backlash. Our governor, current governor, nice guy, Jack Markell, in his State of the State speech, said that less than 1 in 5 Delaware public school graduates are ready for work or college, according to the American College Board. What do you think about that for a moment? That means our business, 80% of our customers are failing. That is unacceptable. And we have schools in Wilmington where less than 13% of the kids read and write at grade level. Somebody has got to stand up and do something and be willing to take on the interests that are currently that are propagating this system. And I'm not sure that re-electing sort of the same political class will do that.
Let's talk about another major issue that the state has been facing over the last couple of years. That's violent crime, specifically in Wilmington, but also elsewhere in the state.
Sure.
How do you address violent crime?
Well, and it's not just a Wilmington issue. I think it's a very good point. I mean, I apologize. This statistic may be a year old. It may have changed, but we're the 7th most dangerous state in the country. Murder Town, USA, in Wilmington. Parenting magazine called Wilmington the most dangerous small city in the country. Don't bring your family here. That was front page, on Parenting magazine. The reality is enforcement is what we need in those high-risk communities. Now, in the current political culture, that may not be the most politically correct answer, but we need substations, we need police in those communities. And those police need to be there on a regular basis, and they need to be ingrained into those communities. The first point here is safety. The second point here is, well, we talked about education. We got to reform those schools, which means willing to be saying, hey, if a school is failing, we're going to close it and reopen it in a different form. And I think the third one is, and this might strike you as odd from a fiscal conservative, is activity. And that's well, what does activity mean? Young people need something to do, right? And the reality is, whether it's the Boys and Girls Clubs or the YMCAs, in these at-risk communities, those aren't, simply good ideas. I think they've become necessities. And if you give young people something productive to do, they're not going to get in trouble. And of course, the overall fix here is prosperity. Crime goes down when people are working. Education gets better when people are working. All of us, community feeling gets better when people are working. So the overall fix, whether it's in Wilmington or these other high-risk communities, is to get jobs into those communities. And we do that, you'll see a reduction in crime and a significant increase in the quality of life for those folks.
We have those seen recently another layer to this issue, and that is beyond this violent crime, the summer has been a difficult one in many communities across this nation. High number of high-profile incidents of police shooting individuals and police being shot. That obviously has created some tension between law enforcement and the communities that they are serving. What can you, if elected, do to address that issue and start kind of rebuilding that trust that seems to have diminished?
Yeah, you got to go there. I was up in Wilmington 2 nights ago, or 3 nights ago. I apologize. It's all running together. I went to the one-act play, Black Jobs Matter. I thought it was tremendously powerful. Didn't agree with everything in it, but I thought it was tremendously powerful. You have to engage. But I will tell you, the first step in that, and again, this may not be the most politically correct answer in the current environment, the first step to that is public safety. Those neighborhoods have to be safe. Nothing can happen until you feel safe. And the way to feel safe is to get the police into those communities. And I understand that in Wilmington years ago we used to have substations. I don't know why they're not there anymore. I think that makes perfect sense. Proactive community policing, and I realize it may not be the politically correct answer in this current environment, but that's going to lead to safety. And when people feel safe, that's the first step to creating a meaningful dialogue. Are the other issues, concerned about, should we look at police and say, hey, what are they doing right? What are they doing wrong? Absolutely, that's very healthy. I'm a conservative. You should absolutely oversee what the government is doing, and the police are the government. But the bottom line is it's safety first. And we've got to make those communities safe, and that's a difficult task. But once we get that level of safety, I think then we can start to have a meaningful dialogue.
Colin Bonini, Republican candidate for governor, thank you for being with us.
Thanks so much for having me.
Appreciate the time. You can find all of our candidate conversations online at delawarepublic.org and delawaredebates.org. Candidate conversations are taped at Delaware State University and are part of Delaware Debates 2016, produced by Delaware Public Media in collaboration with the University of Delaware's Center for Political Communication and with support from AARP. Thanks for watching.